We are looking at Pentecost Sunday, and I want to just describe what's going on here because this is a very interesting story, and a lot of you may be new to it. So for some of you, while this may be some review, there's going to be hopefully some new stuff for everybody. So this comes out of the second chapter of Acts, and this is how it reads. So when Pentecost Day arrived, they were all together in one place. Suddenly a sound from heaven like the howling of a fierce wind filled the entire house where they were sitting. They saw what seemed to be individual flames of fire alighting on each one of them. They were all filled with the Holy Spirit and began to speak in other languages as the Spirit enabled them to speak. There were pious Jews from every nation under heaven living in Jerusalem. When they heard this sound, a crowd gathered. They were mystified because everyone heard them speaking in their native languages. They were surprised and amazed, saying, "Look, aren't all the people who are speaking Galileans, every one of them?" Now that's important because Galileans were kind of looked at as the uneducated hillbillies of Israel. And so the idea that they would have that kind of a cosmopolitan capacity to speak in multiple languages was lost. There was no chance of that. So that's another level of surprise here. And so it continues on. How then can each of us hear them speaking in our native language? Parthians, Medes, and Elamites, as well as residents of Mesopotamia, Judea, Cappadocia, Pontus, and Asia, Phrygia and Pamphylia, Egypt and the regions of Libya bordering Cyrene, and visitors from Rome, both Jews and converts to Judaism, Cretans and Arabs. We hear them declaring the mighty works of God in our own languages. They were all surprised and bewildered. Some asked each other, "What does this mean?" Others jeered at them, saying, "They're full of new wine." Peter stood up with the other 11 disciples. He raised his voice and declared, "Judeans and everyone living in Jerusalem, know this. Listen carefully to my words. These people aren't drunk, as you suspect. After all, it's only 9 o'clock in the morning. It's not like we're in Napa Valley for a pre-dawn tasting of some of the most delicious Cabernet you've ever imagined, so good Jesus would be jealous." All right, so that last part may not be in the original Greek, but it might be. Who can be sure, right? Maybe it was edited out. Anyway, you get the idea. He's saying they're not drunk. And then what happens next is, I cut this part out just for length, is Jesus explains what happened, talked about Jesus' life, talked about how in Jerusalem, the very city that they're in, he was crucified at the request of Jewish people in there in collaboration with Rome, and that now this thing has happened. And so people were like, we made a serious mistake killing Jesus. What do we do now? How do we correct that? And so Jesus replies to the crowd, "Change your hearts and lives. Each of you must be baptized in the name of Jesus Christ for the forgiveness of your sins." That's a way of kind of coming into the community officially. "Then you will receive the gift of the Holy Spirit. The promise is for you, your children, and for all who are far away, as many as the Lord our God invites." So this is a massive net of inclusion that's being spoken here by Peter. He's going to be pushed on that a little bit later on in this story in Acts, which we may or may not get to. But one thing I want to point out here is we kind of take this for granted. The United States had a lot of Christianity from the get-go. People fleeing religious persecution in Europe came here and were able to freely worship as they pleased. There is a movement that has been afoot at different times in history, but it's kind of rearing its head right now to make the United States officially Christian in every way. And I want to say that's a dangerous move. That's an unconstitutional thing that we want to avoid. This idea of Christian nationalism, while there are parts of it that sound kind of like church and stuff, there are more parts of it that are very dark. And so anytime you start to see the flag and the Bible draped a little too much, you need to have the hackles go up in your head because there's a miss here. Because what that inadvertently means is that people who do not say that they're Christian or people of other faiths are actually less than. And that translates into injustice in their part. So here, how many of you are members of the church? God bless you. Thank you for coming today. We need you for your business. You know, to become a, we need you to conduct business, and we need you, period, which I'll illustrate in a bit. You know, here at CrossWalk, we hopefully it's a thoughtful process, but we've tried to find the happy medium between too little and too much. And so after you've figured out that this is a good home for you, we encourage you to watch the CrossWalk 101 video, because you don't hear me talk enough, and thought, why not 20 more minutes? And I kind of go over the makeup of the church and how we operate and all that, and how power structures work in our church, which I think are pretty balanced. And then if you got any questions, I'll field those or direct you to who can answer those. And then if you say yes at that point, then I take your name before the Board of Stewards, and I don't think there's been a time when they've ever rejected any of my recommendations based on conversations that I've had with you. And so then you become an official member because the Board of Stewards welcomes you into membership. And we've got a number of new members that joined in the past 12 months, and we're very excited about that. Pretty easy, and probably when you say yes to that in the community, nobody is going to look at you too funny. You know, nobody's going to challenge you, nobody's going to single you out, unless you're in certain circles, of course, then maybe your crosswalkiness will get called out. But for the most part, you can go on living your life as if you never made a commitment to CrossWalk or became a member. But I want you to understand, the early church, they had a little higher bar when it became a time to join the Christian community. And that bar was baptism. And baptism wasn't really just a simple rite of passage about getting dunked by somebody in a river. It was a statement that you were willing to say yes to this Jesus-following tribe. And in so doing, you are setting yourself in opposition to the prevailing powers in religion of that day. To get baptized in the first 4 centuries of Christianity was literally to say, I am willing to die for this thing that I am seeing and experiencing. A very high bar. And the crazy part is the church grew and flourished, even in the face of persecution at that time. So it's pretty cool. And so I just wanted to point that out, because sometimes we overlook that. And I just wanted to say, hey, if it wasn't for very dedicated people before us, we wouldn't be talking about this stuff today. And I want to say, because of your dedication, people are talking about what God is doing in through this church and in the community. And we'll be talking about that later. So we have this day, and I want to point out what some of these things were, so that you don't miss the imagery that's happening. By the way, just want to remind you, so this is a guy who is collecting stories about what happened now in the early church. He first did the same kind of thing in the Gospel of Luke. Luke is attributed with the authorship of this. He never knew Jesus personally. He didn't live in Israel originally, so some of his geography gets a little bit off in his storytelling. He's getting this information from people who've been trying to follow the Jesus tradition, and so it's a mixture of, you know, pretty strong oral history, and we can take some of the sayings to the bank. And then there's some natural, historical fiction going on. We're not quite sure if the stories that made it to Luke are sort of folk tale-ish, or if they're factual in their presentation. We're not quite sure, and that's okay. We do not judge the first world and their writing on our criteria for what a news article should be printing. You know what I mean? So this is their way of telling history, and they're wanting us to see all these things. So the first thing you need to know is that this day that this whole thing happened was already a Jewish holiday called the Festival of Shavuot, also known as the Festival of Weeks, also known as the Festival of Pentecost. Pentecost meaning 50 days after Passover, which generally, not all the time because it's a moon-related thing, sometimes coincides with Easter. So in the Christian calendar, it's always 50 days after Easter. The Jewish calendar, because it's based on the moon, it can shift around a bit. So it was already on the books, which is important. And that day was a day of harvest of the new harvest. It was a wheat harvest, actually. And it was also eventually really known for a day of celebrating the law that was spoken by God to Moses on Mount Sinai, on the top of Mount Sinai, giving him the 10 Commandments. You all saw the movie. You know what we're talking about here. But that's what we're talking about, is so this God speaking to Moses, giving him his word. So think about that as the backdrop of this story of what's taking place. And the second thing we see here is the sound of wind. And you hear me say this a lot, but remember that the Hebrew word ruach, the Greek word pneuma, all can be translated as the Spirit. Also breath, also wind. So when we see this thing happening, and it's the sound of wind, it's not actual wind, but everybody who's reading this and hearing this, they're like, okay, connecting the dots. Wind, ruach, pneuma, Spirit. God is doing something in this scene. And it would be reminding people from the story from the Older Testament and the book of Ezekiel, who is a prophet, where he had this vision where God takes him to this valley of dry bones. And he asks, or God asks him, do you think these bones can live? And Ezekiel the prophet says, only you know. And all of a sudden the wind started to blow and the bones came back together and flesh came on the bones, but they weren't alive yet. And then the vision continues and says, it's only by the Spirit of God that these will live. And now the Spirit of God blows into these zombies or whatever they are, and they come back to life in the vision, which means that we're not just flesh and blood, but there is, in the way of thinking in the Jewish world and now in the Christian world, it is the breath of God that gives us life. Interestingly, in the Jewish tradition, at least in antiquity, a baby was not alive, was not a living being, until the breath of life was in their lungs. So at birth, some traditions, the baby wasn't a living creature until they were dedicated in the temple, some 7 days later. So anyway, just interesting ways of thinking about what the Spirit of God is and what it represents. Another thing that we see showing up here is engulfing flames. So it was like they saw flames on people, and yet they didn't burn up. And so immediately people from the Jewish tradition knew the story. They were going to remember Moses. They were going to remember that Moses saw this burning bush, and the weird thing about the burning bush wasn't that it was burning. They lived in the middle of the desert, for Pete's sake. So there were lots of burning bushes. The weird thing about this one is it didn't burn up. And Moses went to investigate, and he has this experience of the divine saying, I want you to go back to Egypt, and I want you to tell Pharaoh, let my people go, and that whole story starts. And once the Exodus actually happens and the people of Israel are heading back toward their homeland, how does God show up? In the daytime, God shows up as a cloud by day, evidence of the wind, so don't miss that again. And then by night, a pillar of fire is how the tale goes. So when we see fire showing up, we're seeing presence of God. You start to see all these things coming together. It's pretty amazing. You have a day when God's word was shared. You have the sound of the Spirit of God, and now you have a visible evidence of the presence of God. This also harkens back, by the way, to the Jewish myth of the Tower of Babel. The question was, back in the day, why are there so many languages spoken by so many different people around the world? And in the Jewish mythological tradition, the story developed that a certain group of people wanted to have power over all the other people. So they built this massive tower. It's called the Tower of Babylon. The idea was the higher, the closer you got to God, the more godly you were. So they made it as high as possible. Remember, this is a myth. And when God saw that happening, God says, well, that's just a bad idea. They're going to ruin this thing somehow. So he kills the tower, and he mixes up all the languages so people can't communicate the same way they did, as a way to make sure power wasn't consolidated in one person. So here when we see that all these people are speaking in different languages, it's like a reversal of that. Does that make sense? Now everybody can hear things. Everybody's hearing the one singular voice and one single experience. So that's what that's all about. Did I not tell you this? Oh, yeah, I meant to tell you this. This is the thing I just said. That when we see all these people speaking in foreign languages, that's what it's all about, is inclusion for all. So what is this day? Pentecost is remembered as a day of harvest, when God spoke, and the wind of the Spirit blew, and the flame consumed yet did not burn, and people heard and understood and believed. It was a new dawn, a new era. The church was born. And it says that on that particular day, and again, I don't think anybody took a real head count, but it said when Peter shared this message of what was going on and people were experiencing all this, it said 3,000 people signed up to be a part of this new community that day alone. So a mega church right then and there happened. And I have a question in response to this, because it's an interesting story. You need to take it with a grain of salt, however you want, but don't miss the point of what's being shared here. Before, the disciples thought, even though by their own experience it was a little bit different, but they thought that Jesus was as all the prophets were before him, that the Spirit of God was on him alone, and once he was gone, so went the Spirit. But now, because this baptism of the Spirit thing happened, where they all got it, now they're realizing that this thing is supposed to be for everybody, not just one person, not just for one special leader, but all people. And faith gives us the opportunity and the roadmap to figure out how to open up to that reality. That's really, I think, the job of religion. Technically, religion is related to the root word for religamenting, bringing back together. Religion is supposed to give you a roadmap, supposed to give you helps to open yourself up more and more to the work of God in your life. Remember that phrase last week that we landed on at the end of the teaching? Of course you do. It was, we are all born flesh and spirit, of flesh and the breath of God. The problem is that we forget. So religion's job, CrossWalk's job, is to help you remember, bring it all back together, to help you breathe at a different level, to connect with this greater other that brings our life together, that makes our life more whole, makes our life more loving, that makes the world a better place. It's a good thing all the way around, all the shalomy things that we talk about. So my question for us is, what kinds of things did the church do when they were so full of the Spirit's activity and leading? They had this moment, and it wasn't just to have the moment, but what did it actually translate into in terms of fruit? What was the fruit of this experience? Because it wasn't just meant to be this cool thing for us to talk about, or a really weird thing for us to talk about. It was supposed to do something. So we get a picture of that from the story. The believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, to the community, to their shared meals, and to their prayers. A sense of awe came over everyone. God performed many wonders and signs through the apostles. All the believers were united and shared everything. They would sell their pieces of property and possessions and distribute the proceeds to everyone who needed them. Every day they met together in the temple and ate in their homes. They shared food with gladness and simplicity. They praised God and demonstrated God's goodness to everyone. The Lord added daily to the community those who were being saved, welcomed, made whole, well, at peace with themselves, God, and others. But I want to bring you back to that first sentence in this long paragraph. The believers devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching, to the community, to their shared meals, and to their prayers. And I want to tell you, that sounds a lot like CrossWalk. We use different words, but they're the same things. We use words like stretching and learning. Well, that's them devoting themselves to the apostles' teaching. Why did they devote themselves to the apostles' teaching? Because they were the guys who walked around with Jesus. They had the most memory of what would happen. Why do you listen to a clown like me? Because I've got letters after my name, because I wanted to find out more and more about what this faith tradition is, and I wanted to be able to share those things. And not just me, but so many others that are worth hearing. And so that's part of our stretchiness here. We see incarnating, which is the Christian community coming together. It says it right there. They dedicated themselves to the community. To kneeling and serving, so that's part of the shared meals. But another part of the shared meals, which might surprise you, is this gracing/welcoming. This is a justice move. Back in those days, in the first century, there were strict rules on who could eat together. And there were strict class lines. And a rich person couldn't eat with a poor person. A person who was master of the household couldn't eat with the servant in the household. But when the Christian community came together, they realized that all that stuff was nonsense. And so everybody came around the same table. It's a beautiful, beautiful, revolutionary thing. What is that saying? It's saying that the early church recognized that there was an injustice here, that people were not being treated equitably. And so they erased that, and then two movements of grace had to happen coinciding with each other, because grace and justice happened together. First, the people who were rich and the masters of those who were their servants, they had to have graceful eyes to get over themselves and recognize that those who they treated poorly were their brothers and sisters and equals. That's not easy to do. We know that in our own country. Just think about the segregated South and how long it took and is still taking for an entire group of people to see each other as equals. Still a struggle today, this long. So that happened like that. It was messy, by the way. It was more than a snap of fingers. But it happened there. And then grace had to happen on somebody else's eyes, the ones who had been treated poorly. Now they are being told, you're welcome to this table. And while that would have been an amazing thing and probably initially be like, are you serious? We get to eat together? That would have been amazing. But then after a while, as they recognize what's happening, it's to be imagined that these folks who'd been excluded for a while might need to have grace in their own eyes. They're like, what the heck? What the heck? You guys have been treating my family members for generations like dirt. So grace had to happen both ways. But I just wanted to recognize, just that thing happening around the tables was community, but it was much more than community. It was a grace and justice thing. And then finally, we use the word connecting to talk about spiritual practices like praying, and that shows up there. What I want to say to you is that what I see in that early church, and this isn't why we modeled it this way, we modeled these 5 movements after the life of Jesus in the Gospel of John, and we designed our whole church around it. So our belief statement is designed around that. The way we think about our goals and our objectives are all based around that, and it happens to show up from a different author in the book of Acts, and this is the fruit of the early church's experience of Pentecost. Sounds a lot like CrossWalk. And so I was just thinking about that today and thinking about how can we celebrate that and acknowledge that, especially since it's our annual meeting. And so I have a range of certificates of meritorious awesomeness that I want to share. Nicholas, I'm going to need your help, and Emily, I'm going to make you help me since you made fun of me earlier, so please come up here. All right, we have a bunch of people who help us, and the first group of people I want to recognize, and so you're going to need to hold your hand high until you get one of these certificates, is our CrossWalk greeters and hospitality people. So if you welcome people, in the last 12 months, if you've welcomed people into our lobby space or into one of our services, if you've made coffee or brought in donuts or made something, I want you to wave your hand. And this is what this says, and you guys go give them to them. So raise your hand if you've been on that. Yes, that's very good. Yeah, go, Nicholas, go ahead and pass those out. So this is to certify that CrossWalk greeters and hospitality have performed extraordinary feats worthy of great acclaim, chief among those feats being welcoming people to CrossWalk with smiles, caffeine, and treats. May the glory of these feats live long in the memory of this clan, and may the air be filled with hosannas and good tidings, such as your hospitality is the incarnation of God's love. So thank you very much for that. Yes, yes, yes. All right. We have just a few people here today, I think all of them are here today, that are part of our CrossWalk office team that mind the phones and are nice people when people show up. And I think all 3 of them are here, right? So that would be Sue, Trudy, and Carol in the back. So if you guys could make sure they get those. Thank you very much. Your feats are minding phones, answering questions, and mastering solitaire because most people do things digitally. So there's a lot of solitaire that happens in the office, I'll be honest. But they are wonderful people making a good impression for CrossWalk. Thanks for making a great first impression for our guests. All right. Next thing that we have here, which one? Oh, yeah. Our current Board of Stewards. There are 9 Board of Steward members. And if you would raise your hand so we know who you are. Thank you for overseeing the work and the life of the church. All right. Most of them are here. Excellent, excellent. All right, we have a few others here. Oh, yeah. All right. So we have people keeping us safe. You may not realize this, but churches are targets for violent acts. And we started paying attention to that several years ago. That's why we no longer open the doors closer to our children's wing. We make everybody come in here. And that's why we have guys like Gordon wearing really cool vests so he can feel really powerful. So, thank you, Gordon. And we have a bunch of security people. So if you are on the security team, raise your hand and wave it wildly so that we can celebrate that. Lauren and Gordon, and I know we have a couple others that may not be here with us today. So thank you for monitoring our campus for safety. You bring peace of mind and space for us all. And I want to tell you that, you might think, that's crazy. Why would CrossWalk be targeted? Well, it's because we're CrossWalk. That's why we're targeted. And there have been a couple sketchy times over the years where we weren't quite sure how it was going to go down. There was one time a couple years ago, we were having a picnic out here after a service, and a guy pulls in from license plates from Idaho or something, and he's looking to start a fight. And somebody comes and tells me that he's starting to verbally accost some of our women outside our hall here, and he's making a beeline for the courtyard. And I meet him here because I'm not going to let him in, and turned him around and took him. And it was so cool because by the time I got to the front porch, I had 5 guys behind me who literally had my back, which I know I don't need it because I'm so tough, but I was really, really grateful. So anyway, these guys really matter, and there have been other times where, well, anyway, I won't get into more details because I don't want to freak you out, but anyway, we're very, very happy about that. Let's see, next one. This is a big team. So if you have in the last 12 months served as a volunteer in We Care or Kids Crossing or the 412 Lounge, I want you to wave your hand wildly so that we can celebrate you. All right. So, children's ministry volunteers have performed extraordinary feats worthy of great acclaim, chief among those the feats of loving our youngest crosswalkers. May the glory of these feats live long in the memory of this clan, and may the air be filled with hosannas and good tidings such as, your impact through friendship is greater than you can imagine. That is the secret sauce. The secret sauce for kids having a lasting faith is not memorizing Bible verses and being tested on it. It's the relationship with the community of faith. My kids love this church because you loved them. And when we have relationship with each other, faith gets skin and bones on it. And they realize there is a different way, there's a loving presence and community that needs to be recognized. Along those lines, actually neither of these people are here today. My wife is sick. What's that? Yes, Larice. That's right, yeah. So after we're done here, maybe you guys could go hand off. I think we have 2 or 3 volunteers back there, so that would be helpful. So my wife Lynn directs the whole children's program, and we also brought in Renee Pelagi to run our 412 Lounge. They've been doing fantastic work back there. The program is growing. It's wonderful. It's custom built to CrossWalk's ethos and theology, so it's going to be very love-based, very inclusive. So give a round of applause to them. Very, very good. All right, a few more to go. I have an advisory team, just a few folks that are really nerdy about our 5 movements, and I asked them to meet with me periodically to talk about some of our objectives and what we want to do. So if you're a part of the advisory team, raise your hand. See, Lauren, I know a few people are out of time. Emily is one of those. That's right, very good. I guess that's all they're here today. All right, that's fine. One of those that's just a quick shout out is Dave Carney Brown. He also does so much in leading and teaching meditation. He's kind of like our resident expert, and he's upping his game to teaching a medication class and a meditation class twice a month now at CrossWalk, the second and fourth weeks. So anyway, so appreciative, Dave. If you haven't done our prayer walk, by the way, he was a leading engine of getting that thing done. Go do it out on our courtyard or download it and do it wherever you want from our YouTube channel. Just a few more to go. Is Danny Newman here today, or are they out of town? They're out of town, okay. So Danny Newman and Marcia Della Santa, they've been the ones over the past 12 months who have organized our meal functions. And we're broadening that team going forward, but just a shout out to them because those meal things that we do after church or even a part of church sometimes, they really matter. We really want you to know each other as people, not just coming in for a thing. You know what I mean? So big applause for Danny and Marcia. All right, these 2 people are here today. Linda Smetzer and Carrie Nuccio. Let's see. Well, we'll let you figure. There's Carrie is over there. Linda's right back there. Carrie and Linda, oh, you don't even know what I'm asking you for. All right, so these 2 put in probably 20-ish hours or more a week in our food pantry. And they have pivoted since COVID as things have changed in food insecurity in Napa, and we're very much in communication with the broader picture so that we don't duplicate efforts. And they have figured out step at a time, turn after turn, how to be really impactful with our food ministry. So deeply appreciative of that. So thank you now for them. Very good. We have, I don't know if, well, some of them are here today. We have a finance team that has been helping things along, and a few of those folks, if you're on the finance team, raise your hand right now. I see a few of you. All right. So hand those out if you can, the finance team. These folks are looking at how we organize our finances, where all the money goes, make sure that we have more eyes on it than just a few eyes, and so we want to acknowledge them. Also related to the finance team is Elizabeth Tausch. I don't know if she's in town this week, but it doesn't look like it. But Elizabeth is our financial secretary. So she's the one that inputs all the contributions that come in through checks and stuff into our system to make sure they're labeled right and all that. And that takes a lot of hours every week. She's helping us put all of our QuickBooks stuff online for a new program, which we deeply appreciate. She's one of these finance bookkeeping nerds that really likes that stuff and is a stickler, and every organization needs that kind of a person. So she is really strengthening that. So this is for Elizabeth Tausch when she gets back. So thank you, Elizabeth. I'm down to just a couple more. Ben Newman, I'll talk about him. Ben has been one of what I'm calling one of Ted's merry men. So we have a few guys around here who are doing an amazing amount of very skilled work that is saving CrossWalk tens of thousands of dollars. The big project we've been working on, which finally has been pushed through because of all the permitting stuff, is our gym kitchen, which will be a commercial kitchen that will not just bless the church, but will bless this community in many years to come. And Ben and Ted and Jim De La Santa have put unbelievable amounts of hours to make that thing happen. I'm not kidding when I say they're saving us tens of thousands of dollars. So one is for Ben and the other is for Ted Valencia. And so this is for Ted. This is for certify that Ted Valencia has performed extraordinary feats worthy of great acclaim, chief among those feats being MacGyvering crosswalk conundrums. Because he is a MacGyver like you would not believe. That guy can do anything. It's unbelievable. He can do big stuff. He can do really teeny tiny stuff, tech stuff. May the glory of these feats live long in the memory of this clan, and may the air be filled with hosannas and good tidings such as, thank you for your tireless, ingenious work and leadership. So give it up for Ted. All right. And I have a final two that I want to celebrate in a little bit more of a special way. This isn't to single out like saying some are more special than others, but there come times when some folks have just put in such an extraordinary amount of work that we want to just pause and say thank you. Now, there are people I could do this every time. So for those of you who, I could do that every time too, just know that I love you. This doesn't take anything away from you. But one person that has given an extraordinary amount of time in the last 12 months, first of all, is a person who's shown up and stepped up here on a board level, being our church clerk or church secretary. So she takes the minutes of our meeting, but more than that, she also helps mind the phones in our office. And more than that, she has taken on some of our sanctuary cleanup and prep stuff. So all these tablecloths were put on by Carol Tolan this morning before all of you got here. And more than that, she approached me, I think last summer or sometime, saying, hey, I've got kind of an itch to teach Old Testament. What do you think? And I was like, I think that's a great idea. You're like a professional teacher. And she has had a group that has just raved about her leadership and what they're getting out of this for a full year. She puts in tons of hours of work, and it is amazing. So this just singles out the Old Testament 101. So this is for teaching Old Testament 101, but much more than that. You are a rock star teacher. Way to go. Your students are so grateful, and we want you to have lunch or dinner on CrossWalk. So thank you, Carol. Sitting in the back. And the final one that I want to acknowledge, we decided to move to, first of all, an accounting firm or a bookkeeping firm called Missionwell, which is located in Southern California. It's the first time we have off-sited our bookkeeping, which created a lot of challenges. Missionwell doesn't live here. They're not crosswalkers, so they don't naturally know where to assign different expenses. And so we had to teach them all along the way how to do that. And then we moved from a cash basis version of accounting to an accrual basis of accounting. And the kind of attention to detail that was required for that move meant that we had to have somebody who liked to get into the weeds of the numbers and actually enjoys it and is good at it and wanted the time to do it and had the time to do it. And so Ed Edwards stepped into this treasurer role with that kind of passion. We've had different modes of treasurer over the years, but we needed that kind of in-the-weeds person to go through literally every number. You got to know that every expense report that happens at CrossWalk, that guy has been through everything with a fine-tooth comb. There is amazing oversight because that guy does the hard work. So this is for Ed Edwards and his tireless work. He has worked so hard over the last 12 months, and only Becky knows just how many hours he's spent. But I'm telling you, it is tens and tens of hours a week, right? 30 to 40 a week, I would guess, sometimes, and sometimes even more than that. So Ed Edwards has performed extraordinary feats worthy of great acclaim, chief among those feats being CrossWalk Treasurer. May the glory of these feats live long in the memory of this clan, and may the air be filled with hosannas and good tidings such as your tireless efforts. That I see I didn't print the rest of the sentence. So your tireless efforts are really appreciated, or something to that effect. But anyway, we want you to have dinner as well. All right, so thank you, Ed. Fantastic. Thank you, guys. That's it. And there's one final thing I want to do, and I did this for the early service where the primary person who I wanted to hear was present to hear this. A number of years ago, we lost a really vital, amazing crosswalker whose name was Alan Kinney. Alan was the husband of Karen Kinney. I love these photos. Who knew people wore their hair like that, like Alan did in that upper left-hand picture? That's some serious hair. And Karen, of course, is right there with him. And here's one of those classic shots that I'm sure warms Karen's heart to this day, teaching his granddaughter how to fish, going to a game with Emma. Alan succumbed to cancer a few years ago, and at that time, when he passed, Karen wanted to do something to remember him as a memorial gift. And so she set aside a very strong sum of money. At the time, we weren't quite sure what we were going to do with it. We were thinking maybe a sign out front. But a sign out front is more complicated than it sounds. There are some zoning issues that I'm not quite sure about. There's also exactly what do we want out there. We didn't want to do something that was going to be temporary with a memorial type gift. And so we started thinking around. She wanted to make sure that it was used. And so a project came along that I thought made sense for Alan Kinney. Alan Kinney, when we did our last capital campaign, which was between 2011 and 2013, he was the guy that helped us find and buy the right kind of windows for all of our front-facing rooms in the front of our buildings. All the rest of our buildings are like this. They're single pane. They let energy just flow out freely. But along our front rooms, they're double paned and they're built to last. Alan, they owned a 7-Eleven for many years, and after they sold that and he retired, he worked for Home Depot. And what did he do in Home Depot? He worked in the window department, so he knew his windows, and he was dedicated to efficiency and all that. Well, we had an issue happening in our education wing, and that was that it was too cold in the winter and it was way too hot in warmer weather. And so we equipped our education wing, which includes our food pantry, our youth spaces, our kids crossing space, with HVAC, which is very highly efficient, uses heat pumps, and a significant part of that project is in memoriam for Alan Kinney. And Karen is delighted that it's being used and something that he would feel really good about. So it's a gift that's going to last for many, many years to come, and so we just want to honor Alan here in this space right now. So let's thank God for Alan. So, you know, what I'm wanting to end with today is just a really cause for celebration. As I was putting these things together, and by the way, there's one other that I forgot to make a thing for because it doesn't show up on a roster, because he just shows up all the time, and that's George Webster. George, I'm going to make you a certificate. Well, you don't. Well, let me tell you why you should be clapping. He does one of the thankless jobs here at CrossWalk. Every week he shows up and he gets his gloves on and he picks up the filthy trash you people leave behind and all the groups that meet here, and he puts them in the cans, wheels out the cans to make sure that's all there, breaks down cardboard, fills up all of our recycling, makes sure stuff's where it's supposed to be, puts them all out there. The very next day after they're all emptied out, he comes back, puts them all back. That happens every week without fail because George Webster is a rock star. So thank you, George Webster, for your hard work. There were others that I could have mentioned easily. There's a whole justice thing. Jenny, I'm going to make you one because you are on the front lines all the time in your work with teenagers and suicide prevention. But more than that, you're about inclusion and bringing equity and diversity into the vernacular of our middle school and high school. So thank you, Jenny, for that. You're probably our biggest rock star on that. Grateful. But it takes a lot to make CrossWalk, and you have made CrossWalk. And so I'm just so deeply grateful that after 2,000 years, I think there's our version of it, and I think we're on the right track, and we've become something to be proud of, and I'm just even more excited about what's to come than even what's behind in our 164 years as a church. I think our best days truly are still ahead of us. So I'd like for us to pray, and then to end our time together as a benediction and a prayer, we'll do this rendition of the Lord's Prayer adapted by Philip Newell. But would you pray with me now? So God, as we bring this time to a close, may your Spirit remind us of how incredible this place is. And we just want to say to you, God, thank you. Thank you for being present with us, for guiding us and leading us. This is your church. It's not ours. We don't own this place. This is yours. And we want to be faithful stewards of what you're leading us to do and to be. You have called us to great acts of courage and bravery along theological, political, and sociological lines because shalom speaks into all of those things. And we will keep our ears attuned for how you want us to be a witness to who you are as the presence and being of love. May we be bold. May we be fun. May we be experimental. May we have a blast, and may we celebrate all that you're doing in this space. We thank you, God. To that end, we pray this prayer. Similar to what Jesus taught us, let's pray it out together. Ground of all being, mother of life, Father of the universe, your name is sacred beyond speaking. May we know your presence. May your longings be our longings in heart and in action. May there be food for the human family today and for the whole earth community. Forgive us the falseness of what we have done as we forgive those who are untrue to us. Do not forsake us in our time of conflict, but lead us into new beginnings. For the light of life, the vitality of life, and the glory of life are yours now and forever. Thanks so much for coming. Thanks for being CrossWalk. We'll see you next week. And we have one final thing for Becky to say. Yep.
There we go. My name is, any of you who don't know me, I'm Becky Jo Peterson. I'm the moderator for the Board of Stewards this year. So hopefully you've had an opportunity to read your ballot and to vote. It's really important that you do that. Your voice matters a great deal to how this church is run. And so I ask that you do that. Be sure to place it in the box in the back. And if you have any questions, we'll entertain them now. Otherwise, we're going to close the annual business meeting. So any questions from anyone? All right, we'll close the meeting, and please drop your ballots. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.